Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Don't know if you heard, but Trump is beginning America's descent into fascism. Amazing how our telling black people that we don't care what happens to America because America doesn't care what happens to us is controversial. And why is it that the black grassroots, especially the black media, are not going into hysterics about what all's going on? Well, it's because it's really no different than it's ever been. Do I think that fascism is on the march? Well, I think the people who say that are starting off from a false premise, that being that fascism didn't exist in the U.S. and that what's going on today is a fight to prevent it from coming to the U.S. I posted a video years ago called George Washington, the First Fascist. I'll probably repost it soon, but for those who didn't see it, here's the Cliff Notes version. The word fascist comes from the ancient Roman word fasces, which refers to a bunch of thin wooden sticks tied together, often with an axe handle sticking out of the top of it. It's supposed to be a symbol of how when crooks stick together, they're unbreakable. Now, ever since its founding, the United States has had the fasces as a mainstay of American iconography, especially as it pertains to George Washington. From the countless statues of him both in the U.S. and in Britain, to the painting of him on the ceiling of the Capitol Dome, even inside the Washington Monument, there's a small statue of Washington hidden in the base, and it shows him standing beside a fasces. It's all over the place, and these sculptures and paintings are hundreds of years old, inside the House of Representatives. Whenever you see the Speaker and Vice President's area, you also see that they have brass fasces on either side of the platform. So every single time that you've ever seen a State of the Union address, you also have the President flanked by fasces on either side of him. They've been there the entire time, and yet your precious white media, especially your left-leaning white media like MSNBC and CNN, doesn't tell you this. The fasces is the main symbol of America's founding, and that's where the word fascism comes from. Mussolini would use the fasces as his symbol when he became Italy's dictator. And what is fascism? Basically, it's ownership of the government by private power. Now, businessmen, no matter what the Republicans or the white right may try to tell you, businessmen have an ideology. They all do. They all believe something. When you look at the lobbying groups and these think tanks, they are all established and funded by wealthy white people. And they all are meant to forward a specific political ideology. So it's a lie that the only thing that businessmen care about is money. They already have money. What they want is to put that money to use shaping society the way they think it should be. It's not the working class people who create and fund these think tanks. It's wealthy businessmen. It's not the working class people who are responsible for the fact that Washington, D.C. is literally surrounded by lobbyists. It's the businessmen who did that. What do you think all of that colonialism by the Europeans was about? Even the 13 colonies that would eventually become the United States were founded as a financial enterprise. Look at the names of the original cities in America. Things like the Jamestown Company, the Philadelphia Company, the Massachusetts Bay Company. Its real estate ventures as nation building. The founders of the United States themselves were overwhelmingly businessmen, slave owners by and large. So the ties between American government and the business class have been absolutely incestuous from day one. America is not descending into fascism, it's always been there. And fascism is always an inside job. Contrary to what the MSNBCs and the CNNs might try to convince you, fascists aren't some sneaky gang of outsiders who slithered into the halls of power under cover of night. In reality, they're the very wealthy elites who this society puts on a pedestal and tells you to worship. Fascists will co-opt an existing political party in many cases, but more often than not, the fascists, since they have money, they'll usually just go and start their own political party. The Nazis started their own party, as did Mussolini, but it takes far more than some zealots with some big ideas to drag a country into fascism. Even in countries that do have a genuine opposition party, fascists cannot come to power unless that opposition party refuses to fight them. This occurred both in Germany and in Italy. In those countries, the opposition parties had a choice. They could either go ahead and take on the rising tide of fascism, or they could instead try to fight for their personalized parking space in front of the government capitol headquarters. You can guess which one they went with. And we see the same thing happening in the United States with the Democrats. Why aren't the Democrats actually doing anything about all of this GOP fascism? It's not new. They've seen the stress fractures forming for many, many years, but they did nothing about it. Why? Because they're controlled opposition. When you look at who it is that the money comes from for the Democrats, it's the exact same sources as the Republicans. I've detailed for you how Kamala Harris literally was taking money from America's largest landlord, Blackstone, and she had a BlackRock senior executive as a so-called advisor on her presidential campaign. Now, what kind of advice on the housing crisis do you expect those men to give her? Do you think they're going to be saying, hey, Kamala, make sure that you outlaw all of these hedge funds owning entire neighborhoods. Make sure that there's no more single-family dwellings that can be owned by these Wall Street bigwigs. Do you think that's what they told her? Or do you think they told her, you better not touch it, not if you want any more money? What we're seeing is the beginning of a political convergence. Democrats talked all that noise about being terrified about Trump and fascism, but that was all just empty hot air to terrify you into doing what they wanted. Trump's back in the White House, and what do you see the Democrats doing? You got Gavin Newsom, the former mayor of San Francisco, the gay capital of America, and he's now speaking out against transgender athletes. And you got the left-leaning white media who's cheering him for it. Now, how does the guy who was the mayor of America's gayest city actually do a 180 like that? Because this is what he's always stood for. But make no mistake, putting aside the sideshow of the whole transgender debate, Gavin Newsom's going to be taking aim at black people in general and the black media in specific sooner or later. That train is never late. Keep in mind, this is the guy who carried out that cynical political exercise where he pretended to return Bruce's Beach to its black owners. But as I told you from the very beginning, it was all just a con game, a PR stunt. Gavin Newsom and the rest of those California Democrats knew full well that those black people wouldn't be allowed to develop that land because of all the zoning restrictions that were on it. So they would be forced to sell it because at the end of the day, you don't keep land as a vanity project. You keep it so it can pay for itself by being developed. If you outlaw developing land, you might as well go ahead and sell it right back, which is exactly what happened with Bruce's Beach. It was all just an empty PR exercise. Something to give Gavin Newsom a way to point and say, see, I've done something for you Negroes. And keep in mind, there were some black folks who were silly enough to say, see, this is reparations. Well, we see what Gavin Newsom thinks of reparations now, don't we? And we certainly saw what he thought of it last year when he personally led the charge to shut down any talk of reparations or a Freedmen's Bureau out there in California last year. Newsom is trying to position himself for a 2028 presidential run, and it's obvious that he's going to be picking from the exact same playbook as Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. He wants to be a new Democrat. Now, he's trying not to make the same mistakes that Kamala Harris did. He already has the support of California in that political machine, so he instead wants to gain support in the other 49 states, and he knows that trying to engage with black voters would be a non-starter for him because he's seen what's happened in his state, and he knows that when Kamala Harris ran out to other states for her damn-to-fail presidential campaign, she got called out for it. Her record followed her where she went. It didn't disappear just because she left California. Newsom also saw what happened to Martin O'Malley, the former white mayor of Baltimore. That guy thought that he was going to make a half-baked run for the presidency too, but that delusion was crushed when he tried all of that all lives matters claptrap and black activists shut him down. So Democrats understand that black people are paying attention now. Black people are recognizing the Democrats' weasel words and calling it out. If they're going to call themselves getting black support from now on, they're going to have to actually do something in order to get it. And for the Democrats, that's the deal breaker. What, you niggers think we're supposed to actually do something for you? Black voters are coming to realize not just what Democrats are saying, but when they're dodging and evading, and also what their records are in their home states. People are starting to do their homework. You're listening to the black media, and you're finding out these would-be candidates are dirty as hell. We're not waiting to see if MSNBC and CNN or The Rot are going to educate our people. We're doing it ourselves. You have the left corner of the white media who are praising Newsom for his quote-unquote new stance on transgender athletes, but they could care less about that because that's not an issue that actually decides the election. What the white left wants to do is to directly attack the black grassroots. They want to define us as the far left extremists who the Democrats need to shut down. For the good of the party, of course. For the good of America. This stance by Newsom will inevitably come back to aiming his guns at us because that's the point they wanted to reach from the very beginning. And you can bet when they finally do go in on us, you'll have these decrepit fossils from the Congressional Immigrant Caucus like nigger Jim Clyburn chiming right in with Newsom and the rest of the Democrats and those leftist mouthpieces on cable, and they'll all be claiming that we were the ones who cost the Democrats the election. When the reality is Jim Clyburn's boy, Jamie Harrison, had been in charge of the DNC for 4 years by that point. That's why Trump's back in the White House, is because of the Jim Clyburns. Republicans never blame their base or their voters for their election losses. You have never seen the Republicans ever say, man, we got to get away from all of these lunatic, right-wing fringe kooks in our party. They never called their base a bunch of extremists. You have never heard the Republican Party talk about their voters that way, even after their lunatic, fringe, extreme right-wing base stormed the Capitol. So why is the white media pushing the false narrative that the Democrats need to start getting tough on this left-wing, far-left fringe who's so out of control, when in reality, the Democrats totally ignore their own voters? There's absolutely nothing that the white media can accuse the so-called far-left extremists of saying that's more damaging than what the far right has already done. So all you shills and plants in the comments whining about how Trump and the GOP are fascist, I agree with you. So tell me then, why is it the Democrats are trying to appeal to the same voters as the Orange Man? Why are they moving toward the right if the right wing is so off the cliff crazy? If the Democrats truly wanted to win elections, then they would actually say what they're going to do about the housing crisis, which, by the way, is the very core of the cost of living crisis. But then again, why would Democrats do anything about it? San Francisco is ground zero for the housing crisis. And remind me again, who was the mayor of San Francisco? Oh yeah, Gavin Newsom. And what did he do about the housing crisis out there? Nothing. He wouldn't even talk about it. And everybody's up in arms about how these tech bros are taking over the country and they're going to be ushering in techno-fascism. Okay, but when Gavin Newsom was the mayor of San Francisco, did he get tough on Elon Musk, or was he making deals with Elon Musk? Did he do anything about Alphabet? I'm sorry, I mean Google. What did he do about Microsoft? What did he do about Facebook? What did he do about Airbnb? Nothing. Instead, they were proud of the fact, we happen to be the home of all of these tech companies. Looking at what happened out there in San Francisco with these so-called liberal Democrats, that gives you a perfect microcosm of the hypocrisy, lies, and duplicity of the so-called left as the white media teaches it to you. But expect to get carpet bombed with all of this gibberish that Gavin Newsom is trying to hit a centrist tone. He's trying to move to the center. This guy is a moderate who's trying to deal with the far left extremists in the party. You know, those people like who are online, those Russian bots who are talking about reparations. What we in the black grassroots have done is to demand that the Democrats state plainly what it is that they're going to do, not only for black people, but to push back against all of this Republican bigotry and legislative extremism that the Democrats have allowed them to do. For the better part of 30 years now, Democrats have been tiptoeing to the right, but now they look set to go into a full-fledged sprint. I just hope the people who have been giving us all their apocalyptic scenarios about the GOP ushering in fascism will save some outrage for the Democrats and tell them that they're wrong for joining the fascists. But by their definition, if they did that, then that would make them just some far-left extremists too. Right? Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Charles Hairston, Derek, Frederica Moore, Marlo Stewart, and Dwayne Demps. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.